if you look at like the Jonestown story, the reason it turned into a 32-hour series is, like I said, they started in the 1950s doing stuff that you would recognize as just early civil rights stuff, boycotting a local business to get them to integrate. Right around the time, a few years before, but like that Martin Luther King was going to start that kind of thing. And then so you have Greensboro, you have these things. And their trajectory as an organization, the People's Temple, I realized, that trajectory from about 53 to 1978, when everything came to an end, that 25-year trajectory follows almost to the month. It is uncanny, like how perfectly it follows. It makes perfect sense because of how plugged into it they were. It follows the trajectory of the civil rights and protest movement in America through its rise, its peak, its radicalization, and then its decline in the late 60s and then into the 70s into insanity and death. And it is, it's almost you can tell the story of Jonestown and give a month-by-month account of that process, of those protest movements being radicalized and turning to violence and insanity in the 60s and 70s. And so it became a vehicle for that. And that's what really the story is about. It's about that period of American history from the mid-50s up until about 1980.
The number of true well-known Democratic politicians who were patrons of the People's Temple is quite amazing. Willie Brown was one of them.
Oh, yeah.
But every mayor of San Francisco.
Look, I have specific contempt for all of those people, just because, it wasn't just that when Jim Jones was a power broker in San Francisco that they would go give a speech at the church because they were trying to bring out votes or something. You had Angela Davis, you had Huey Newton, you had a lot of these other people who, when these people were in Jonestown, and you got to remember, first of all, 300 of those 1,000 or so people were kids. Another 300 to 400 were people over like 60 years old. Okay. So that's who's out there. Fully 2/3 of the people who committed suicide out there were kids or senior citizens, right? And as they're approaching this point of just maximum paranoia, maximum group psychosis down there, and you listen to the recordings that they left for us, and they're just getting increasingly deranged. They're certain that the CIA is going to come and kidnap their children and put them through brainwashing. This is not just Jim Jones and his charisma telling these people this. These people understood themselves as a revolutionary movement, and they were true believers. Like, they were true believers, these people. A lot of people like to say that at the end it was basically murder. These people were forced to do this. These people were, at least for the vast majority of them, were not forced to do it. They believed in what they were doing, and Jim Jones by that point was almost like a figurehead of the movement, to be honest with you. He was just sort of the titular leader, but the movement, the organization was running itself, and you had a bunch of true believers who were out there trying to start the revolution and start a new society in the jungle. And in the last few months, when they're approaching just maximum psychosis and paranoia, you've got like Angela Davis, Huey Newton, Harvey Milk, like a lot of the, I think he got killed shortly after, who are literally calling into Jonestown and being put on the speaker for everybody to listen, saying, we know that the government is after you, and we just want you to know that we have your back, and, there's just, the whole world is coming after you, but we're there for you. We're on your side. This is a bunch of people who are like approaching a crisis point of paranoia and psychosis is going to lead to their mass death within a few months. And that's what these people are doing, calling in, just feeding into it. And, it makes me sick because you have people, and I know this wasn't maybe supposed to be just a Jonestown thing, but this topic, again, like it affected me a lot, right? There's this one woman, she was the lead singer of the Jonestown band. And the night before they all committed suicide, Leo Ryan, the congressman, was there, and his entourage was there, and they put on a performance, and there's a video.
And his aide, Jackie Spear, who became a member of Congress herself. Yep.
And there's a video of that night. It was and they show a musical performance, and this woman, who's the lead singer and band conductor, is up there, and she's this African American woman, beautiful, great voice, up there, like really like confidently commanding the stage and like really in her element, right? Well, her backstory was back in Indianapolis. Jim Jones, when his family had lived there, knew her when she was a little girl, just a little bit. Like her mom came to the church sometimes, something like that. And after Jim Jones and his people left, she got abandoned by her mother. She ended up being pimped out by her drug dealer boyfriend when she was 15, 16 years old. And she's living her life on the streets, being beat up by this guy who's forcing her to go out and prostitute for him, and that's her life. And now she's about 20. She's committed suicide 3 or 4 times at this point. And now she's 20, and the Jonestown people make a trip back to Indianapolis because they would go around the country in their buses and, speak at churches and hold events and stuff. And so they go back there. And she just kind of knew who the Jones family was. She said they treated her with kindness and her mother with kindness when she was a little girl. And she's in the depth of suicidal depression, drug addiction, she's close to the end, right? And man, even in the podcast when I was recording, it makes me emotional because they got out there. She went there to the event when the Jonestown people came in because she just remembered that like these people had been kind to her 15 years ago, when she was a little girl. So she came out to see. And Jim Jones sees her and immediately recognizes her and starts talking to her, just, friendly, everything. The people start talking to her and she starts telling them kind of about how her life's gone since that time. And he said, oh, well, great. Or he said, not great, but he said, oh, well, come with us, hop on the bus. Let's go. We've got houses. We got a whole community out here. We can find a job for you until you do something, whatever. Yeah, come on out. And so she did. And she went out there and they cleaned her up. They got her off drugs. They took this broken, destroyed, abused woman and put her in an environment where and again, you have to understand that even this psychotic movement, the way it turned out, this part was genuine. They put her into an environment where she felt like she belonged. And it really was, the people cared about her and she cared about the people there, And so she ends up being the band leader. She's like a super talented musician. And she's writing the songs. She's leading the practices for the band. She's the lead singer and everything. And, and she died out there with all the rest of them, with all the rest of those old people and kids and everybody else. She committed suicide with everybody else. The night after you see that video where Ryan's out there. It's
amazing that you watched that video. I mean, I don't think I'd want to see something like that.
I had to.
Yeah, well, of course.
I had to. I have a rule, and I've broken this rule once, and it's probably an episode I'm just least proud of, maybe. Although it's a lot of people's favorite episode. I have a rule that I don't start a podcast until I feel like I can at least understand where everybody in this story is coming from. I didn't start the Israel-Palestine podcast until I felt like I could see how the Zionists saw things, how the Arabs saw things, how the British saw things, and how their behavior toward each other made sense to them in the context of their own world. And I did the same thing with Jonestown, which was a challenge because, talking about a psychotic cult leader who dragged his people to their deaths, in the jungle, their meaningless deaths. There were literally people, Tucker, hundreds of people, parents who were injecting cyanide into their babies' mouths and watching them froth and twitch until they were sure they were dead. And then they could take the suicide drink themselves because they had done that. This is almost 1,000 people. It was one woman who was in the Capitol. She was at their office in the Capitol. She wasn't out at the actual compound. And when she got the call, it's time, we're doing it, she slashed her kids' throats and then stabbed herself in the heart. This is, and yet these people loved each other. These people actually did believe in equality. They believed in human brotherhood and all these things. And she slashed her kids' throats. And if you're going to tell a story like that, you can't do what all of the biographies of Jim Jones do. They'll all talk about these weird things about him as a kid and something where it was all there at the beginning. And it was just the gradual, the gradual flowering and unfolding of this psychosis that had always been in there. And all these other people just got sucked into it. It's total nonsense. You really have to understand how people could get to a place like that from where they were. You know, everybody, doesn't matter who you're talking about. Uday Hussein. There was a time, and I always try to keep this in mind because, I mean, it's like it's one of the governing thoughts as I go through any of these stories. Uday Hussein, Joseph Stalin, I don't care who you're talking about. There was a time where that was a little 3-year-old kid.
That's right.
And they weren't evil. They weren't who they became. And so how did they become what they ended up being, you know?
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. We hope you'll subscribe to it. And by the way, you can hit the little bell on there and get notifications every time we produce a video. We hope you'll do that also.